Right, thank you very much for joining us. Nice and early. Looks like you didn't party too hard last night. And you made it in the morning. And if you did and still made it in the morning, then you need a pat on your back. Well done. High school delegates are welcome to stay, but this is really for university delegates. So I think you should use, better utilization of your time. I just want to make sure there are 8 breakout sessions and you should, yeah. So I want to quickly introduce my co-panelist, Bhakti Shah. I've known Bhakti for a very short time actually now, just about a year and a half, 2 years. And she embodies what we are going to speak about engagement and empowerment. And, because she embodies it, it's easy to hear from people who embody it rather than who preach it. And so, thank you, Bhakti, for joining me on this. With all the stuff that is happening, we can actually just do this by the show of hands, if that's all right, yeah? We're going to make this about very as interactive as possible. So I'd just like you to answer this. We are not setting up the Mentimeter because we are just such a handful of individuals here, but what is the paradigm focus for enrollment management? That is, when I talk about enrollment management, we're talking about communication, outreach, admissions at your university. And you can just think through this. Is it considered to be a sales function? Is it constantly a function that operates on Excel and says, what are the numbers, how many come in, how many applied, how many enrolled, how many are, what's the funnel like, etc.? Is it about, is this function largely determined by reaching some of the best students and being as selective as you can? And that's the effort for a lot of universities. Is it largely, are the conversations largely revolving around economics or the costs? Are decisions largely being made on this is a cheaper fare to go to, this is a more expensive fare? There's a lot of cost-based conversations that happen. Are decisions being made based on ROI? You do an activity, 3 months later you need to do an ROI report. And you say, okay, this activity, this is the ROI and that's how I'm going to. So, just to clarify, school delegates are welcome, but this session is primarily for universities. No worries, you're welcome if you want to stay, but get a better session for yourself. And then enrollment management, the conversations are about student fit. Like, who's going to succeed here? Like, it's a very student-centered approach to enrollment management. And then finally, it's about geography. I'm in the state of California. I want to see, be in this state, etc. Good morning, Avnita ma'am, Nitika ma'am. Just so that, no, it's not only for universities, but primarily for universities. So I think you will be better off with, some other breakout. Thank you. So very geography, and it could be a combination of these. So can we just, a couple of people can comment. Do you identify what is your primary focus with enrollment management, or is it multiple of these things? Multiple? Anybody who feels very strongly like what's the number one focus here? Do you have like a 1 and 2? Okay, seasonal, wonderful. Student fit, okay. Geography also. We don't want to travel too far or too wide or too many different places. Sorry? Lovely. And what university are you from? Okay, RIT, wonderful. Yeah,
I can talk about my experience of working for a small to mid-sized school. My name is Mr. Prashant, and I work for Lewis University, which is based on just outside of Chicago. And
yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. All right. So for Lewis University, we wanted to test the waters in terms of in-country representation right in the middle of the pandemic, when a lot of schools were going through budget cuts and things like that. So at Lewis, our first focus was to get into the Indian market, and for that, number one was sales, because we didn't have too many Indian students. So our first and primary focus was to how do we get more Indian students. And now it's been 2 years, we've started seeing a lot of success. We started focusing on other things. How do we focus on selectivity? How do we focus on geography and so many other things? Yeah.
Fair. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you have the virtual participants also visible for me? I don't want to see myself. Can you keep the virtual participants also visible? Yeah, that would be lovely. Perfect. I think that's great. Thank you for everybody who's joined us. Thanks, Beth, for joining us. Sam. Lovely. So I think something for us to introspect on and look at what is driving enrollment management, and where do you go to recruit your students? You can raise your hands. Lead providers, how many of us use lead providers? Virtual audience can also raise their hands. Yeah, okay, thank you, Beth. How many of you use high school, go to high schools, engage with high schools? Thank goodness, very good. How many of you do use some ed tech companies like these? Okay, lovely. Independent counselors, how many of you work with independent counselors here? How many of you work with coaching institutes? You know, you've got coaching institutes or teaching institutes, particularly in India and some other parts of the world. How many of you work with agents? Many of us do, okay. And then anyone, or you pretty much work with anyone who can give you a student. How many of you there? Anyone who can give you a student. Okay, I love the honesty, you know. And that's beautiful. And no harm. And, you know, I want to do one more question, and then what do you do to recruit? And you can raise your hands again here. Give regular information about your university. All right, keep sending updates to a mailing list, etc. Conduct career workshops for students. Career workshops for students. How many of you do that? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, 5. Then focus on collecting student information for future engagement. You know, that's like a big part of what you do. An activity is evaluated on how much data you brought back. How many of you have that as a key metric for you to continue doing anything? Is how much data did you bring back? Okay. Focus on engaging the influencers, the school counselors, principal. Complete, you know, lots of focus on that. Okay, you pretty much do everything. I mean, this is an enlightened bunch of people. We don't need to talk much.
I am to get out of the entire school engagement aspect of it. Our alumni are actually playing a very important role
Great.
at the moment, where their siblings are coming to us.
This is not on, I think, the mic. And I hope the virtual audience is seeing the presentation also. They are seeing it, right? Beth, you can see the presentation, all right? Yeah, super. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Because they can't hear you otherwise.
So I
Yeah.
was just saying that apart from the school counselors and principals, basically outside the entire school engagement aspect of it, our alumni are playing a very important role in our recruitment at the moment, at least within India.
That's beautiful.
They're key influencers, to be honest.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that. So now, before Bhakti takes over, what are we talking about? What was the reason we submitted this panel, and what are we talking about? I want to share one case study with you. There is a university that invested about $180,000 US dollars over 18 months with a PR agency, etc., and some other media houses to build their brand in India. All right, I can't name the university, I can't, share too much more detail. 180,000 US dollars over about a year and a half, between a year and 2 years, that money flew to this agency, and I was privy to this information in one of my consulting assignments I did. And the ROI on that was absolutely nothing. Neither did they enroll students, but there was this perception that investing money in this activity, being in the newspaper, having articles published and whatever else, etc., is going to positively impact them. For all the school delegates who are just entering or the ones attending virtually, I just wanted you to know this is primarily for university audiences, this session. But you're welcome to stay and enjoy what we're telling university audiences as well. So absolutely, but if you'd want to use your time to do something which is specifically for schools, there are 7 other breakout sessions right now, and I'd like you to just be conscious of that. Now, $180,000, if it was spent on empowering and supporting, even, you could easily empower and support about 200, 300 schools. Their outcomes would be completely different. Now, so I want to give you another example now of a university that took 2 girls from the slums of Pune and paid for all 4 years of their study in the US and got their passports done, got them clothes, taught them English. They didn't have any background. This university has broken all records. The whole school ecosystem, the whole counselor community. This was a difference between a fishing project, which was the media project, and an empowerment project where 2 girls were empowered to get education coming out of. The media project just seems so logical to do because, your university, it's so visible, etc. at the beginning, and it seems like it's going to have ROI, etc. But it actually completely failed. And just taking these 2 girls. Now, I'm not talking about empowering individual students. This whole session is actually about watering the tree. That's how we the tree is the school. How do you empower and support the school? And what is this journey? Recruitment is largely driven by a sales approach. Engagement is driven largely to have recruitment as a byproduct of it. And empowerment is, I forget recruitment, I forget engagement, I just keep empowering. When I just keep empowering, I'm going to, as a byproduct of that, engage, and as a byproduct of that, recruit. Now, because I did a fair bit of consulting before I, kind of retired and moved away from all my entrepreneurial activities, I saw that just 10% of reallocation of enrollment management resources, 10%, you typically look at all the salaries you pay within enrollment management. That's outreach, communications, admissions. You look at all the salaries you pay, look at all the budgets. If you're a international institution, different parts of the world, it could go into several $100,000 or several $1 million. If you're in India, it would be again a few $100,000. You're looking at all the salaries, everything else that you pay, all the travel, it's actually astonishing. 10% of that reallocation to watering the tree or empowering the school has magical outcomes. Universities actually have just not been adventurous enough to try it. And I had another case study where 22% of the total university budget, the enrollment management budget, obviously, you have 78% of the budget was around salaries and around travel and whatever else. 22% was reallocated purely to support schools. And support schools in 6 areas, not just in, schools can be supported in 6 different areas. Curriculum, extracurriculars, their administration can be supported, financial aid and scholarships you can give for certain schools, you can create special programs for them, research, and then the counseling office, which is where you normally, try and invest on the counselors. But 22% of the budget was invested on watering the tree or empowering the school. It is absolutely spectacular what they managed to achieve. They were enrolling 76 times. So they were I again don't want to give the name, etc., because I'm not allowed to. But if they were enrolling 1 student from the region, they enrolled 76 students from that region. By reallocating, they had 0% of their budget on school empowerment. It was only on recruitment. Go visit the school, present to their student. Forget about empowerment, tell them about my university and see what you get back in return. They completely realigned and started to invest. And so I just wanted to share that. The watering the tree begins with a need analysis. Don't just put anything, evaluate. What do you care about the most? You need to look at what are your needs, what are the needs of your potential, the region that you are in, how could you empower, what are your needs, what do you care about the most? Finding your purpose in enrollment management. I think that's very important, is what is my real purpose? And then recruitment as a byproduct of engagement, engagement as a byproduct of, or rather engagement as a byproduct of empowerment. So the focus becomes empowerment. I'll give you an example, and this is now Bhakti's slides here, just another 2 minutes. Mount Holyoke College I can name this college because this program's pretty popular. How many of you are familiar with Mount Holyoke College, in the US? They actually ran a program with the American School of Bombay called the MHS Shakti program. They took girls from pretty deprived backgrounds. They all traveled for like a week of training, etc., in Mumbai. This program gave the sort of mileage to Mount Holyoke, which is unparalleled. And obviously they had very positive impact. Many people in India, actually a lot of people had no idea about Mount Holyoke the way they did post this program. I saw it during my counseling career and in the last few years. Another example was, there was a coalition of US educational institutions called the Global Sphere Network. There are multiple institutions that got high school students to shadow PhD students in research. This is truly empowering. What happened was, for some of these universities, the PhD students, so there is no, enrollment management is not like admissions, outreach, communication. Now what they're doing is they're getting the larger university to become a magnet. There's a student who's studying and a student who may study with you, both speaking to each other. And they're drawing exactly what you said about, your alumni and whatever. But very, very powerful. There were magical outcomes here. Again, I don't want to get into too many details, but there were many, New York Academy of Sciences, University of California, Santa Cruz. There was a whole bunch of institutions that were part of this program. And then, there are ways with scholarships, etc. I don't want to get too much into it. I think Bhakti will give you a much better perspective on how you could empower, but over back to you, Bhakti.
Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you so much. Hi. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's really early and I was definitely partying till late, so never mind. I made it. Um, okay, let me speak your language, right? ROI, yeah? Something that everyone is asked about in this room. We can't escape that reality. That's a fact. But there's a more fundamental question for every one of us here. What is outreach? And is outreach the same as admissions and enrollments? So I want to get a sense in this room. Do you, in your universities, have a separate setup for outreach and a separate team for admissions, or is it clubbed? How many of us have separate offices for outreach and admissions? Okay. Which university are you from? Okay, great. So Jacobs, Flame, Aston, of course, APU. Oh, it's separate. Okay, Ritz Mekan. All right. Anyone else? Yes? All right. Awesome. So we have, I think the room is sort of split 50-50. The ones that don't have separate departments for outreach and admissions, I want to understand that approach a little bit. So I just want to hear a little bit from the audiences here. Why do you think that admissions and outreach is the same thing? What is the purpose of admissions and what is the purpose of outreach? There's no right or wrong answer. Yes.
Hi, so I'm Mamta from Australian Catholic University, and from like in my perspective, probably outreach has to do more with profile raising and creating more awareness about the university, not just selling, but yeah, with admissions, it's more of like getting the things done. So whatever is coming their way, processing all that and that. But yeah, in like if I talk about from our from our perspective, so then our departments are clubbed. But then it's not that the same people are doing the admission or the same team is doing the outreach also. So there are different teams, but yeah, they all are under a same department.
Fair enough. And I've seen that set up, I think, in a lot of universities where you have different individuals as a part of one larger umbrella who are managing different functions within admissions, outreach, etc. So that brings us to the question, what is outreach, right? There was a study done in 2009, and there was a very interesting white paper released. It's called Situating Outreach and Engagement in the University. Concepts, Challenges, and Opportunities. I'll send the link to all of you, don't worry about it. It was published by Washington State, Penn State, and Michigan State. And they defined outreach very beautifully. And they really make you question what is the role of a university, fundamentally, right? And just look at the statement. Higher education institutions are responding to society's increasing requirements for accountability. Colleges and universities, large and small, public and private, have emerged from their ivory towers and are investing their resources and expertise in hands-on involvement to address important societal issues. Universities are not degree churning machines, okay? As outreach folks, I think our fundamental orientation is that I need to get a student and I need to get him out of my university with a degree, right? Fair enough. But how many of our universities here have research centers? Yeah. How many of our universities have global faculty with diverse interests who are in their own capacity doing research and contributing to society? Now marry that with your purpose of, when Ganesh asked the question, how many of us go to schools for outreach? And I think pretty much everyone in this room raised their hand. So it's so basic. When you are doing institutional engagement, you cannot do successful institutional engagement without impacting the institution as a whole. If you are a knowledge ecosystem as a university, the school has multiple stakeholders as well that need hand-holding. In a country like India, you know that there are more students than teachers. Teacher training is a joke. Career counseling has probably just gotten into the mainstream, and we have a very long way to go. With so many gaps in the system. Here we are, on the one hand, as universities, struggling to get a segue into a school and getting a meeting with that principal and this principal, whereas you, as a university, can actually propose solutions to the problems that they are facing. So this is a classic case of not understanding your customer. You don't know what your customer needs. You're not going to be able to provide a solution that makes them want to talk to you, right? Make them want to talk to you. So this is the age of the engaged institution. I'll give you a very simple example. In the Indian higher ed landscape, and I think, how many Indian universities here? I can see Vikram, I know Minu and Arshad are here, Indian, Flame, all right. I'm really happy to see Ahmedabad University, CREA, of course, and Flame here. And this is preaching to the choir, because these are the universities that are the engaged institutions. If you think about the higher ed landscape in India, the universities that have a brand perception, which is significantly different from some of the others, the reason is because they are engaging with schools, all right? They are invested in the growth of schools. And India is a classic example and case study on how in the last 10 years, the universities that have really made their mark, some of them as young as 5 years old, who made their mark more than the ones who are 25 years old, 30 years old, is because they've invested in institution building, not of their own, but other institutions. I know we have a lot of international universities in the room here. And I was doing this session in the Gurgaon Regional Forum, some form of this. One of the classic challenges that a lot of international universities did share was the fact that they're not really physically here in terms of their setup, right? I want to hear from some of our colleagues here that I'm sure this is not new, this is not like the first time you're hearing of engaging schools, but what is it that has been the classic impediment for you to be able to do this successfully? Yes, please.
Hi there. It's Sean from Cardiff. I think in terms of the work that I do in trying to get the university to engage with schools, schools want help with curriculum, academic visits, taster lectures. And I think from my perspective, the difficulty I have is getting time from academics and getting their buy-in in terms of doing this type of activity. That would be our biggest challenge.
Join the club. I think that's such a classic challenge all of us face. You reach out to faculty and say, hey, can you do a session for us? And they're like, no time. And I think, it's funny, but it's also very serious and significant. And it's not just our problem. The challenge is that universities, there is a classic divide between sales and faculty. I'm just calling out the elephant in the room, right? That's a fact, that what we do is somehow less important than what they do. And it's not a we versus them situation, but somehow it is like that in universities. And that's where I think a lot of us need to really galvanize this and go back and try to bridge that gap, because unless faculty is invested in outreach, it is extremely difficult to do a good job. There is only so much that you and I can speak about. There is only so much that you and I can empower, right? Faculty investment is critical. And I think whether you're an Indian university or an international university, this is one thing that all of us need to work on, because I've seen a lot of examples of masterclasses that are being done. But again, that brings us to the challenge that there's no structure to engaging schools. We wake up one day and we're like, you know what, why don't we do a workshop? Okay, but it's not ingrained, it's not integrated in our thought process. It needs to be a part of your outreach plan, right? Yeah, Kala, go ahead.
I remember when we drafted the whole plan for Australian National University engagement in India, this was a classic example. It's a top university, they had to engage. Faculty was very embedded in research. So one of the things we proposed at the time worked very well is each school had to nominate one faculty, right? So we started with the College of Business and the College of Science, and we said one faculty who's got interest to engage, and that person became the one person. So it's not about all faculty, but one. And what ANU did in the next year is actually build that into one of the KPIs for the faculty, who was interested in that against the teaching hours as well. So it came out of the faculty interest. There was motivation from the university to reward the faculty, and that kind of increased the engagement. And the moment the faculty started to engage, they couldn't stop coming to India because they just loved being engaged. So I guess that it's a bit of a...
I think that's thanks, Kala, because I think that is the solution. And it's hard to drive the solution, honestly. Like, I mean, if you get your university convinced to add outreach as a KPI for their faculty, and I know some universities do, like I know at CREA it is a KPI, right? But it's hard to get that buy-in from management. But it's a journey. You have to start somewhere. There is a lot of gyan in my slides, but I'm just going to keep, these things on the screen here so you can take a look. But what does the age of an engaged institution mean? These are the kind of things that you can do. These are the focus areas in terms of investing in local community building, investing in capacity building for educators, and connecting K-12 in industry. I'm going to spend some time on just the last part of it as well. No, actually first I'm going to talk about the capacity building and skill building. What we're doing here, right, is you're meeting with hundreds of schools. How many of us are confident that we are going to be able to engage even 20% of the schools that we have met here? That's great. I want to learn from you. I really want to listen from you. Yeah, you want to do it, but I'm saying how many conferences do we attend on an average? A lot, right? Our job is to connect with schools. When we connect with schools, and when our teams come back and they say, I met with 70 schools today. I met with 200 schools. I'm like, so, how does that matter? Because unless you have an engagement plan thereafter, it means nothing. It's exactly what Ganesh said. You're going to a school, collecting data, but if you're not engaging with that data, and we all understand that very, very well, that's the B2C aspect, right? When the leads come in, you engage the funnel, blah, 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 blah. But what about your institutional leads? And this is where you need to have a plan for engagement, where you can have capacity building, skill building workshops, all of these planned in as part of your follow-up conversations once you leave, right? If you're simply going to reach out and say, hey, give me a meeting, I don't think that's really going to work necessarily, all right? But the impact is going to be much greater there. But that is still chasing one after another, right? It's just chasing one school at a time. Now look at mass impact. I'm going to give you an example. I come from an edtech background, so I was extremely, and I still am in a lot of ways, sales-oriented, very, very number-driven, very data-driven. But 2 years ago, something happened to me, and that was IC3. And I'm not saying it because I'm sharing the platform with Ganesh or any of that, but this genuinely has impacted the way I look at the person at the other end of the table. What I ended up doing is, and I still remember my first interaction with Ganesh, where I spoke about ROI as a partner. Ganesh had a very interesting conversation with me. He said, you do not understand IC3. You don't understand how this works. I really didn't. It took me some time where I invested my time and energy in training, being a part of the residential weeks. Meenu spearheaded that. We really, really partnered with IC3 on their training programs. We took a lot of interest and initiative in doing proposals, sessions, workshops. And then our mindset changed, where we said, you know what? The more we are investing in building the other person, the more it's really helping us. And that is a fact. That when you are teaching something to someone, you're learning much more. But at the same time, the impact that you have on them is far greater than any kind of sales collateral that you could invest in. People will remember what they learned from you. So this is very, very important to keep in mind. A very key area for universities to look at is IC3's residential weeks, their training institute. It's a great way and a very significant and impactful way to get your university's brand and commitment out there to capacity building. Because often we don't know where to start. And IC3 Institute is a great place to start. It's worked for us. All right, so the 3 E's of sustainable approach to enrollment. We've all heard of the sustainable development goals, right? Why don't we have sustainable enrollment goals? So educate, empower, and then engage. Please don't collect data and chase. That's really not going to work. Educate, empower, and engage. And let me draw a parallel. Why do we feel like we are from a different planet? Look at corporates. The ones that invest in corporate social responsibility are the ones that are truly, truly market leaders. Similarly, if you're invested in corporate social responsibility, or call it social responsibility, if you may call it, you are truly going to see impact. All right, so I've just kind of defined sustainable enrollment goals in my own words. The blueprint to long-term trust and goodwill for a university is in becoming a facilitator for growth and an instrument of change in high schools and local community. It's not just high schools. It's also your local communities. Because don't forget, the people who interact with you also have kids. They also have families. It's everyone is a customer for a university. Everyone is a customer. So you do not put your blinders on and think, oh, there's no student here to be had. No, there's a student everywhere, right? All right, so I'm coming to the end of my slides. These are some of the sustainable enrollment goals that I put together because we need a starting point. I'm sure a lot of you already are doing many of these things, but I just thought I'll consolidate all the best practices that I have seen many universities do, right? I know for a fact that a lot of universities are already doing many of these things, but you could actually define a goal for your university, a sustainable enrollment goal, or have a charter of sustainable enrollment goals. Also, a little, I think, maybe tip here, as outreach, in order to be really seen for what we do and to be respected for the work that we do and the impact that we have on the university, taking our own work seriously is very, very important. We are thought leaders. We are not salespersons. And therefore, if you have sustainable enrollment goals for yourself and for your university, it will go a very, very long way. The laundry list is here. I'm not going to read each one out, but one thing that is really close to my heart is, not had the chance to do it yet, but is supporting girls in science. So I know that there are universities that are forging ahead with STEM education and STEAM education and STEM through liberal arts. This is a great way to push that agenda out there. I'm going to take a pause here. So I want to get thoughts in the room from universities who have probably already, who are doing some of these or are working on some of these goals. I'd love to hear from the room. I know many of you are. Yes, Anju, absolutely.
So, for me, I was never a salesperson. I've taught in IB for 14 years. So when I joined Flame University, for me, I already had an understanding of what schools feel and what do they really want. They're not selling their students' data for, just to put a poster end of the year that, hey, we've got students placed in XYZ university. And so for me, every time I think of engaging students, I'm just thinking, what is it that the student is taking back from me? Because you need to appreciate their time. Look at the pressure they have of their board exams, their parents, their teachers. Everybody is saying, they just want so much from them. Nobody's really listening. So again, you just keep racking brains, and we know the most difficult part is to get the faculty to join you. So just identified somebody who was really passionate, and I didn't say that I need your help. I said that, hey, you know what, you have opportunities. You're doing this because Flame hires faculty for their research, and teaching is their they also teach obviously. So they just got really interested. And then during the pandemic, I started this series called Upskill Series. And this was about having the students to come attend a 90-minute workshop where they learned something, because the schools also, offer a certain kind of curriculum which which has been offered to students. But there's a lot more that as a liberal education university, I wanted to educate that, hey, you know what, there's so many opportunities. You may want to explore these options. So just kept very, very diverse faculty coming, doing their workshop, giving them a letter of participation, which they could use in their CVs, applying to anywhere in the world. So it was just looking at them, keeping them at the center, not us. And of course, we have our own, office to run where you need to meet certain numbers, you need to do certain activities, because that's my job. So yes, but I think the most important thing is, and I'm so glad that we are all talking about this. Many of us are doing few things. Many of us want to do this. Some of us have support, some of us don't have. But I think once we're talking loudly in these forums, I think we'll definitely take these messages back and try to do all of this. And of course, I'm very proud that, we're on the right track, and we've lots more to achieve.
I think Bhakti touched upon this, building a university inside out or outside in. You're actually building a university by not building a building on the university. You are helping a school build a building, not a physical building, but a building or a structure that will allow for you to actually build your institution. And is it about those 4 years or 3 years? And how do we reimagine enrollment management? That's why this whole conversation, where it is about a couple of years before the student arrives and several years after the student leaves. So empowerment permeates everything within the university, and just like you'll support the alumni who've given you tuition dollars, you will also support the to-be enrolled student who hasn't yet given you the tuition dollars, but could be one of those who show up, or could have 10 other friends. Like she said, everybody is a potential. You may go to a city or a country and not meet a single person that will come to your university. But because you empowered those 100 people you met, none of who come to your university, there are another 50 who heard about or learnt about you, or who now are interested in you. And I think that culture is working very well. And I never took credit for this. And I don't think it'd be fair to ever take any credit. But I can tell you that it was one of the most selective universities today, and they are here, Ashoka University, when they started to come to IC3, and we're completely about empowerment. There's nothing else that we did but to empower. We had no product or service for a student. We had nothing to really offer. They're actually the first co-host of the annual conference. First ever annual conference co-host. They traveled every city. Actually, one of their founders traveled. Other founders came to IC3. Today, they're the most selective university in the country in that space. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. And I'm not, but I thought that group really took empowerment to another level. And a very dear colleague of ours, Kanchi Khanna, who used to lead that effort at that time, they identified it early and they said, yes, let's go in. So they went to Bhubaneswar. They went to Tejpur in Assam. They went to so many places where people would not touch. And I'm saying for all our international colleagues also, there is so many places. There is nothing to do really beyond a point in a Bangalore or a Delhi, particularly in tier 1 schools of Mumbai and Delhi and Bangalore. Right? If you really had a chance, you would want to focus on tier 2 and tier 3 schools in these cities, or the tier 1 and tier 2 schools in tier 3 cities. It really, the whole idea of recruitment itself we are trying to break free from and say empower, but there is another aspect here, which is that you do not recruit or do not engage or do not empower by city or by community or by country or by state. You do that by school. So you said KPIs for faculty. One of the KPIs is how much did you support institutional build. I wouldn't even call it, I love the example that Kala gave of Australian National University. It is actually a KPI around institutional building from the outside in. How did you build the institute? By impacting people on the outside. And another detailing in that KPI could potentially be how many schools did you empower or impact? And I said one of the areas was the faculty, and what if you got your school of education did something that really helped all the 300 teachers at a La Martiniere for boys or girls in Kolkata do better assessments and find a more humane or a more appropriate way to do assessments. These 300 teachers are your lifelong ambassadors. Now they are using what you have. So this whole notion, and again, using faculty is just one piece. I think enrollment management being part of everybody's KPI. Like everybody's. Faculty is one. Current students get involved, which there's nothing better than that. And they need projects. You look at all these student volunteers here. They just here because they want this exposure to be with people. Our current students are our greatest asset. So I think there are so many ways of doing it. So many universities have done some great work, but we'd love to see if there are other questions. I'm going to let Bhakti answer more questions because she has more. Yes, Vikram. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the current things that work for us, and I'm sure all universities have this, is a lot of times when we go for an ask from outreach, there's a lot of pushback from faculty, right? Because they usually, when they deliver something, they want it to be like the best. And they need time to prepare it, right? Like us, they can't just get up and say, we'll do a workshop tomorrow for teachers, which is 3 hours. I think a lot of times what works is whatever you have existing, modules from your foundation programs, modules which are introductory in nature. And for us, we have at Ahmedabad, we have something called ISP, which is the Independent Study Period, right? Which is basically a 3-week course that is offered in winter. And this is only for our graduates. And one of the years we opened it to schools all across the country, and we had a bunch of students who came from Lalaji Omega in Chennai, all the way to Ahmedabad, and they did that program. And now we'd never go to that school ever again. And I think, how do we use existing resources in the university and actually find people who want to support the mission? I think that's most important. You can't force somebody into doing something. Like building KPIs is great, and I know it is important. But if somebody is not into it, it's very hard. So maybe we can use whatever we have in our universities, look at it carefully, speak to people to really help schools build capacity.
I just saw the 5-minute sign, so I'm conscious now. Thank you, student volunteer. I just want to say one thing and then let Bhakti respond. Why outreach? Why are we even going to faculty saying come for outreach? Come for institutional building, institution building. And And so the fact that we are even using outreach or recruitment itself, we're coming out to build our own institution. You can build it staying on campus, and again, it could be students, it could be parents, it could be associations. The one thing that we haven't spoken about is there are large number of associations. There are the Catholic diocese, they have their own institutions. You've got the Jesuits, you've got the Chinmaya Mission institutions, you've got boards, you've got state boards, you've got, in countries, you've got these other consortia. There's so much. Their members are huge influencers as well. It is about saying, if you have 500 faculty at your university, can you get collective 500 hours in 1 year? 1 hour for one faculty. If someone is more motivated, he'll give 2. Average, I'm saying 1 hour, one faculty. Then sit down with and I obviously used to do this consulting work in the past. You sit down with those 500 hours and see what you can create. How many lives can you impact through those 500 hours? The plan always seems to start in enrollment management with, what is my budget? I am saying the plan needs to start with, how many hours do I have of collective institutional building effort? You can't say I want to build a building and I will do it without cement and raw material and whatever. And the raw material is not just my salary and enrollment management or the travel budget, etc. The raw material is all of this. In fact, if this raw material is available, then you can invest some of your enrollment management budgets better. Instead of trying to do lead generation activity or trying to do something else, you can, so start with that. And I think that's something that I'd recommend. But Bhakti, you have the last word. I think we're closing in.
It's always, in these sessions, I love these sessions, but it's also very frustrating because you're trying to do so much in such little time, and we're also trying to sort of not just tell you what we can do, but how do you do it is really the question, because at the end of the day, there has to be a structure and a plan, etc. I think as outreach and admission folks, we have 2 battles to fight, really. One is external, where we are trying to promote our institution, and it's also internal, within the institution, where you're trying to tell people what you're actually doing is beyond just selling. And I think that internal campaigning is something that we need to be conscious about as well, and do that very consciously, especially if you are leading your function in your university. I think you need to make a conscious effort to make stakeholders within the university aware of the work that you and your teams do, and what it takes to raise the profile of the institution. I'm just going to leave you with one thought. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So just to add on to that, so I think probably one of the good idea to go about is, and that's what I have also seen work, is that align these things with the vision and mission of the university. That how, because every university have got a vision, that, and these things do come under those visions. So how do we relate these things, and how well are we able to present it in alignment with our vision or mission of the university? That also generally helps at times, especially when we are going to the senior management about talking about.
Absolutely. I've got the 1 minute warning.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to wrap this and say, that just gives me an idea very quickly. In order to be able to do that, it's not going to happen at one go. It's a very sustained effort. Seek meetings with your vice chancellors, your chancellors, very, very often, to tell them what you're doing and how much it takes to do what you're doing. I'm just going to leave you with one thought. If you have an impact mindset, what you chase will start seeking you. All right? Just leaving you with that thought. If you have an impact mindset, what you chase will start seeking you. We've seen the results of it. All the best. Time's up.